So if we go back, for those of you who are older, you will know that an early presentation of autism spectrum disorder involved usually visible abnormalities of speech, repetitive movements, poor social understanding, cognitive difficulties involving learning and attention. Lots of these kids have significant learning problems. But the other thing is their marked sensitivity. So lots of things can put them off. There has been little change, but what began to appear in the 70s and 80s were biographies of high functioning people like Temple Grandin and Jennifer O'Toole, amongst others. And these people have allowed us to have insight into the life of being a child and now an adult. And it's really an eye-opener. So I would encourage people who haven't had an opportunity to read some of this literature. In the 1990s and 2000s, the concept of a spectrum was introduced by the diagnostic people, and the same areas of difficulty, but milder. So it wasn't as obvious. There were many people where you had to ask a lot of questions about their social functioning and things like that, because they often didn't show obvious behaviors like stimming or toe walking. But the term Asperger's syndrome came on stream in the 1990s, and it was acknowledged by the DSM-4, and it really, until they came up with the notion of an autism spectrum, most of the people that we're talking about today, the high functioning individuals, would have been called Asperger's syndrome. Just going back to the strict DSM-5 TR criteria, and this is why my sense is that people aren't diagnosing it. There's a lot of people who are still not comfortable making this diagnosis. The criteria that people must meet all three social communication deficits: social emotional reciprocity, nonverbal communicative behavior, and difficulty developing and maintaining social relationships, and 2 of 4 of the restrictive repetitive behavior. So they have to show either motor movements or rigidity or sensitivities or restricted or fixated interest. That means that many of the higher functioning individuals who wouldn't show these things clearly would not have been diagnosed early on. They might have been simply seen as quirky kids or things like that. But I'll tell you as we go along why these things are important to diagnose. As I stated already, most clinicians are still uncomfortable about making the diagnosis, except in those areas where the behaviors are very obvious. And there's a little recognition of the individuals who are very high functioning. They sort of mention it, but don't indicate. And most of the people that we're talking about, particularly around the area of gender dysphoria, are very high functioning. And there is no mention of difficulties with self-regulation. And for me, that's a huge oversight. When you talk to enough parents of kids with these difficulties, that's one of the first things they will mention, going way back to when children were young, is what they refer to usually as meltdowns. And these are periods of intense emotion that can result from anything like having to deal with a change, or the feeling of their clothes, or a remark that somebody's made to them. And they just can go into fairly extreme feelings of anger and wanting to blame others. But then they also can turn around and say that they're very sorry for what they've done, and realize that they shouldn't have done it. And they tend to take things in when they realize that they're screwing up, or people are getting frustrated with them, and start to blame themselves. So you get this ricocheting anger and feeling quite awful. We'll talk about anxiety and depression in a minute, but it's the flip-flopping thing, and I think it's critical to understanding these kids.